Part 1. The galaxy was vast, endless, and teeming with life. Billions of stars shimmered in the cold void, their light traveling across unimaginable distances to reach the eyes of those who dared to look up. Among these countless worlds, humanity had carved out a place for itself not as conquerors, but as equals among the many species that made up the Galactic Council. It was an alliance born of necessity, forged after Earth's first contact with alien civilizations. For decades, it brought peace and prosperity. But now, cracks were beginning to show. Ethan Carter stood at the edge of the observation deck on Narration, one of the Council's most prominent meeting hubs. The planet was a marvel of engineering, its surface dotted with towering spires made of crystalline materials that refracted sunlight into dazzling rainbows. Below him stretched a sprawling cityscape, filled with beings from every corner of the galaxy, some humanoid, others so alien they seemed almost incomprehensible. Their voices blended into a low hum, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter or heated argument. Ethan watched them all silently, his mind racing. He wasn't just here as a spectator, as Earth's youngest ambassador to the Galactic Council. He carried the weight of his entire species on his shoulders. At 32, Ethan had earned a reputation for being sharp-witted and level-headed, traits that served him well in the cutthroat world of interstellar politics. But today, even he felt out of his depth. The Council was descending into chaos, and no amount of diplomacy might save humanity from what was coming. "Ethan," a soft voice called behind him. He turned to see Rachel Moore walking toward him, her face pale but determined. She was a scientist, not a politician, yet she looked more exhausted than anyone should after weeks of non-stop work. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and there were faint circles under her eyes. Still, she managed a small smile when she reached him. "You're supposed to be resting," Ethan said, his tone gentle but firm. "You've been running yourself ragged." "I could say the same about you," Rachel replied, leaning against the railing beside him. She glanced down at the bustling streets below before turning her gaze to him. "Besides, I didn't come here to talk about sleep. There's something you need to know." Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Rachel hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. Satisfied they were alone, she pulled a small data pad from her pocket and handed it to him. This changes everything." Ethan took the device and activated it. Lines of text and graphs appeared on the screen, detailing patterns of resource allocation within the Council over the past century. At first glance, it seemed like standard economic data, but as Ethan scrolled further, his expression darkened. "This can't be right," he muttered. "It is," Rachel said quietly. "I've double-checked it myself. The Council has been manipulating resource distribution for decades. They've been siphoning off supplies meant for smaller, less powerful species and funneling them to their own planets. And guess who gets blamed whenever shortages happen? Us." Ethan stared at the data, his jaw tightening. This wasn't just corruption, it was systematic exploitation. If word got out, it would shatter whatever fragile trust remained between the Council's member worlds. Worse, if the wrong people found out Rachel had uncovered this information, she wouldn't be safe. Neither would he. "Why are you showing me this now?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice low. "We're already walking into a lion's den. The last thing we need is another weapon aimed at us." "Because you deserve to know," Rachel said firmly, "and because I think you're the only one who can do something about it. You have a chance to expose this before things spiral completely out of control, but you'll have to choose carefully. Timing is everything." Ethan nodded slowly, though his mind was still reeling. He knew Rachel was right. This discovery could either save humanity or destroy it. Either way, the stakes had just become impossibly high. The two fell silent for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. Outside, the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere in the distance, A group of alien musicians began playing an unfamiliar tune, its haunting melody drifting through the air. Finally, Ethan spoke. "All right," he said, handing the datapad back to Rachel. "Keep this safe. Don't show it to anyone else, not yet. Let me figure out how to handle this without starting a war." Rachel nodded, slipping the device back into her pocket. "Be careful, Ethan. These people don't play fair." "I know," Ethan replied with a grim smile, "but neither do we." With that, they parted ways. Rachel headed back to her quarters to continue analyzing the data, while Ethan prepared for the upcoming summit. As he walked through the gleaming corridors of the council building, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping onto a stage where every move could mean life or death for himself, for Rachel, and for all of humanity. When he entered the main chamber, the atmosphere was electric. Delegates from dozens of species milled about, exchanging greetings or arguing passionately in languages both familiar and foreign. Above them loomed a massive holographic display showing the council's emblem, a circle surrounded by 12 stars, symbolizing unity among the founding members. Ethan doubted any of them truly believed in that ideal anymore. His thoughts were interrupted by a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he found himself face to face with Cale Vorn, a representative from a distant star system. Cale was tall and imposing, with skin that shimmered faintly in the artificial light. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Ethan's, studying him intently. "Ambassador Carter?" Cale said smoothly, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "I trust you're ready for tomorrow's session. It promises to be eventful." Ethan forced a polite smile. "As ready as I'll ever be, Ambassador Vorn, though I suspect eventful might be putting it mildly." Cale chuckled, though there was little warmth in the sound. "Indeed, times like these test the mettle of even the strongest leaders. Perhaps we'll find ourselves aligned in our goals." "Yes." Before Ethan could respond, Cale gave a slight bow and walked away, leaving him with more questions than answers. What did Cale really want? Was he friend or foe? In a room full of predators, it was hard to tell, as Ethan took his seat among the other delegates. He reminded himself why he was here. Humanity's future depended on his ability to navigate this minefield of alliances and betrayals. Whatever happened next, he couldn't afford to fail. Not now, not when the galaxy itself hung in the balance. Part 2. The council chamber was a cavernous hall, its ceiling lost in shadow, and its walls lined with holographic screens displaying data streams in dozens of languages. Rows of seats spiraled upward like the tiers of an ancient amphitheater, each one occupied by representatives from across the galaxy. The air buzzed with tension, a mix of muttered conversations, sharp exchanges, and the occasional burst of alien dialects that sounded more like music than speech. Ethan sat near the center, his posture stiff but composed. He scanned the room, taking note of the shifting alliances and simmering hostilities. At the heart of the chamber stood the council's president, a towering insectoid creature named Zorathis. Its segmented body gleamed under the artificial light, and its multifaceted eyes reflected the glow of the central hologram. Zorathis tapped a claw-like appendage against the podium, signaling for silence. Slowly, the noise subsided, though not entirely. The delegates remained restless, their patience wearing thin. "We convened today to address the growing unrest among our member worlds," Zorathis began, its voice resonating through the chamber. "Recent accusations have been made regarding resource mismanagement and unequal distribution. These claims threaten the stability of this council and must be addressed immediately." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest of his chair. Resource mismanagement. That was putting it mildly. He glanced at Rachel's datapad, which he now carried discreetly inside his jacket. If anyone dared to bring up Earth's alleged hoarding of advanced technology, he'd need to act fast. But so far, no one had mentioned it directly yet, A delegate from the aquatic species known as the Valens rose from their seat. Their sleek, translucent forms shimmered faintly as they floated above the floor, supported by a personal gravity field. "We demand answers," the Valen representative said, its voice rippling like water over stones. "Our colonies are suffering. Supplies promised to us have vanished without explanation. How can we trust this council when such betrayals occur?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Several other delegates nodded vigorously, while others exchanged wary glances. Ethan noticed Cale Vorn sitting a few rows away, his expression unreadable. The tall ambassador watched the proceedings with keen interest, his shimmering skin catching the light as he shifted slightly in his seat. Zorithus raised a claw, silencing the crowd once more. "These allegations will be investigated thoroughly," it assured the assembly. "However, let us not forget that cooperation is the foundation of this council. Without unity, we risk falling into chaos." Before Zorithus could continue, another delegate sprang to their feet. This time, it was a reptilian envoy named Sarek, whose scales glinted like polished emeralds. His voice was sharp, almost venomous. "Unity. You speak of unity while your own actions undermine it. Evidence has surfaced linking certain members of this council to deliberate sabotage of neutral colonies. And who benefits most from these attacks? Humanity." Gasps erupted throughout the chamber. Some delegates turned to stare at Ethan, their expressions ranging from suspicion to outright hostility. Ethan felt his pulse quicken, but he forced himself to remain calm. He stood slowly, drawing all eyes to him. "Ambassador Sarek," Ethan began, his tone measured but firm. "Your accusations are serious and merit careful consideration. However, I must ask, what evidence do you have to support such claims? It would be reckless to point fingers without proof." Sarek bared his teeth in what might have been a grin or a snarl. "Proof," he hissed. "You humans have always sought to dominate. Your rapid technological advancements, your refusal to share resources equitably, these are signs of greed, not goodwill. Now, entire colonies lie in ruins, and whispers name Earth as the culprit. Do you deny responsibility?" Ethan clenched his jaw, but kept his composure. "I deny nothing because there is nothing to deny. Humanity values peace and collaboration above all else. We have followed every regulation set forth by this council. If there are breaches elsewhere, they should be investigated impartially. Blame without basis only serves to divide us further." His words seemed to resonate with some delegates, particularly those from smaller, less influential species. They murmured among themselves, casting uncertain looks at Sarek, but the larger factions remained skeptical, their distrust palpable. Cale Vorn chose that moment to rise from his seat. His movements were deliberate, commanding attention without effort. "Ambassador Carter makes a valid point," he said, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. "Blame without evidence breeds fear, and fear leads to chaos. Yet, we cannot ignore the possibility that corruption exists within this council. Perhaps it is time for a full audit of our operations, transparent and unbiased." The suggestion sparked immediate debate. Some delegates cheered Cale's proposal, while others shouted objections, claiming it would waste valuable time and resources. Zorithus struggled to restore order, its claws clicking impatiently against the podium. Amid the chaos, Ethan caught Cale's eye. The ambassador gave him a subtle nod, as if to say, "We'll talk later." When the session finally adjourned, Ethan retreated to a private alcove near the chamber's entrance. He needed a moment to collect his thoughts and, perhaps, figure out Cale's angle. The man was too smooth, too calculated. Offering transparency sounded noble, but Ethan suspected ulterior motives. He didn't have long to wait. Moments later, Cale approached, his presence radiating confidence. "Ambassador Carter," he said, his lips curving into a faint smile. "That was quite the performance back there. You handled yourself well under pressure. Thank you, Ethan replied cautiously. Though I'm not sure performance is the right word. I was simply stating the truth. Of course, Cale said, his tone light, but probing. Still, honesty alone won't save you or your people from the storm brewing here. Trust me, I've seen how quickly alliances crumble when panic sets in. Ethan studied the taller man carefully. And what exactly are you suggesting, Ambassador Vorn? Cale leaned closer, lowering his voice. I'm suggesting we work together. You clearly understand the stakes, and I believe I can help you navigate them. In return, I ask for your loyalty when the time comes. Loyalty to what? Ethan asked sharply. To you, to dismantling this council. I won't throw my lot in with someone whose goals I don't fully understand. Cale chuckled softly, unfazed by Ethan's skepticism. Fair enough. For now, consider me an ally, a temporary one, if that suits you better. But mark my words, this council is rotting from within. When it collapses, and you'll want friends in high places. With that, Cale straightened and walked away, leaving Ethan to ponder his cryptic warning. Was Cale truly offering help, or was he manipulating the situation for his own gain? Either way, Ethan couldn't afford to dismiss him outright. Later that evening, Ethan returned to his quarters, where Rachel was waiting anxiously. She had spent hours poring over additional data, uncovering even more evidence of systemic corruption. Her face lit up when she saw him, though her relief was short-lived. How did it go? She asked, handing him a fresh cup of coffee. Ethan sighed, sinking into a chair. About as well as expected. Sarek accused Earth of sabotaging neutral colonies, and Cale proposed a full audit of the Council's operations. Things are unraveling faster than I anticipated. Rachel frowned. An audit could expose everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Are you ready for that? I don't know, Ethan admitted, but we may not have a choice. Cale offered to collaborate, though I'm not sure how much I can trust him. Rachel hesitated, then placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Things escalate. Remember why you're here. Humanity's survival depends on you making the right calls, if they're hard ones. Ethan nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, but he knew Rachel was right. There were no easy answers, only difficult decisions. And as the galaxy teetered on the brink of chaos, he realized one thing with absolute certainty. The choices he made in the days ahead would shape not just humanity's future, but the fate of countless worlds. Part 3. The next morning, Ethan woke early, his mind still racing from the events of the previous day. He stared at the ceiling of his quarters, replaying the accusations, the debates, and Cale's cryptic offer in his head. The council was unraveling faster than he had imagined, and every decision felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. One wrong step could send everything crashing down. Rachel was already up, seated at the small desk in the corner of the room. Her fingers flew across the keyboard of her datapad, pulling up streams of information that flickered across the screen. She looked exhausted, but determined, her focus unbroken, even as Ethan stirred. You didn't sleep much, did you? Ethan asked, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. Not really, Rachel admitted, without looking away from her work. I found something else last night, more evidence of resource manipulation. It's worse than we thought. Entire planets have been left to starve, while others hoard supplies. And guess who's pulling the strings behind it all? Ethan frowned. Let me guess, the Council's inner circle. Exactly, Rachel said, turning to face him. But there's more. Some of the shipments meant for those colonies were rerouted to Earth, or at least, that's what the records show. Someone's framing us, Ethan. If this gets out, it won't matter whether we're innocent or not. They'll use it as an excuse to turn everyone against us. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. So we're dealing with sabotage on two fronts. Actual attacks on neutral colonies and fake records, implicating Earth. Whoever's orchestrating this knows exactly how to push buttons. Which means we need to act fast, Rachel said firmly. If we can expose the truth before they spring their trap, we might stand a chance. But if we wait too long... She didn't finish the sentence, but Ethan understood. Waiting wasn't an option. He stood and paced the room, trying to think clearly, despite the chaos swirling in his mind. What about Kale? Rachel asked after a moment. Did he give you any clues about his plan? Not really, Ethan replied. He wants us to team up, but I don't trust him. For all we know, he could be part of the conspiracy, or just using it to grab power for himself. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. Still, he might be useful. If he's willing to help expose corruption, maybe we can steer him in the right direction, without showing our entire hand. That's risky, Ethan said, stopping mid-pace. If he finds out we're holding back, he'll turn on us in a heartbeat. It's a gamble, Rachel agreed. But right now, we don't have many options. Besides, we can't do this alone. We need allies, even temporary ones. Ethan hesitated, weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded. All right, I'll play along with Kale for now, but I'm keeping my guard up. In the meantime, keep digging into those records. If we can find concrete proof tying the corruption to specific individuals, we'll have leverage. Got it, Rachel said, returning to her work. Just be careful out there. These people aren't playing fair. Later that day, Ethan met Kale in a secluded lounge near the council chambers. The space was dimly lit, with soft ambient music playing in the background. A few other delegates lingered nearby, engaged in quiet conversations. But Ethan and Kale chose a table in the far corner, away from prying ears. Kale greeted him with a faint smile, his piercing blue eyes glinting in the low light. Ambassador Carter, I trust you've had time to consider my proposal. I have, Ethan replied, taking a seat across from him, but I need to know where your loyalties lie. Are you truly interested in exposing corruption, or are you just using this situation to further your own agenda? Kale chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair. A fair question. Let's just say I believe the current system is broken beyond repair. Transparency might slow the rot, but real change requires dismantling the old structures entirely. As for my agenda... He paused, studying Ethan carefully. Suffice it to say, I prefer chaos to stagnation. Sometimes, destruction is necessary for renewal. Ethan suppressed a shiver at the cold certainty in Kale's voice. The man wasn't just ambitious, he was dangerous. Still, Ethan forced himself to remain calm. And what role do you expect me to play in this renewal? For now, simply stay close, Kale said smoothly. When the time comes, I may need your influence or your silence. In return, I'll ensure humanity isn't crushed underfoot when the council falls apart. It was a thinly veiled threat, but Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, meeting Kale's gaze directly. You should know, I'm not interested in playing games. If you want my cooperation, you'll need to give me something tangible, something that benefits both of us. Kale raised an eyebrow, impressed by Ethan's boldness. Very well, he said after a moment. There's a faction within the council planning to escalate tensions against Earth. They intend to present fabricated evidence of your involvement in the colony attacks during tomorrow's session. If you act quickly, you might be able to preempt them. Ethan's stomach tightened, so the trap was set to spring sooner than he'd anticipated. And why are you telling me this? He asked cautiously. Because I'd rather see you survive, Kale replied with a shrug. For now, at least. Dead heroes are less useful than living ones. Ethan nodded slowly, processing the information. Whether Kale's warning was genuine, or another layer of manipulation didn't matter right now. What mattered was preparing for the storm ahead. That evening, Ethan returned to his quarters to strategize with Rachel. She listened intently as he recounted his conversation with Kale, her expression growing increasingly grim. This changes everything, she said once he finished. If they present fake evidence tomorrow, it'll ignite a firestorm. Even if we refute it, the damage will be done. We need to strike first, Ethan said firmly. If we reveal some of what you've uncovered, just enough to cast doubt on their claims, it might buy us time. Rachel hesitated, biting her lip. We're not ready to go public yet. Exposing partial truths could backfire if we don't have all the pieces lined up. I know, Ethan admitted. But we don't have a choice. If we sit back and let them frame us, we lose everything. At least this way, we control the narrative, for now. After a long pause, Rachel nodded reluctantly. All right, I'll compile the strongest data points we have and create a presentation. But you'll need to deliver it convincingly. This has to hit hard. I will, Ethan promised. And if anyone pushes back, we redirect the focus to the Council's corruption. Make them defend their actions instead of attacking us. As Rachel worked tirelessly to prepare the presentation, Ethan rehearsed his speech, refining each word, until it felt sharp and precise. By the time they finally called it a night, exhaustion weighed heavily on both of them, but determination burned brighter than ever. The next morning, Ethan entered the council chamber with a sense of purpose. The air was thick with tension, and the delegates buzzed with anticipation. Whatever happened today would shape the future of the galaxy and, perhaps, determine whether humanity survived it. As Zorithis called the session to order, Ethan took a deep breath. He knew the coming hours would test every ounce of skill and resolve he possessed. But one thing was certain: failure was not an option. Part 4. The council chamber was alive with tension as Ethan rose from his seat, his hands steady, despite the storm brewing inside him. All eyes turned to him, some curious, others hostile. Zorithis, the insectoid president of the council, clicked its claws impatiently, but gave a slight nod, signaling for Ethan to speak. Ambassador Carter, Zorithis said, its voice echoing through the vast room. You requested the floor. Please proceed. Ethan stepped forward, his movements deliberate and calm. He glanced at the holographic display hovering above the central podium, then addressed the assembly. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, I stand before you today not to defend Earth against baseless accusations, but to shed light on a truth that affects us all. Recent events have placed humanity in the crosshairs of suspicion, yet the evidence being used to condemn us is flawed, and deliberately so. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some delegates leaned forward, intrigued, while others exchanged skeptical glances. Sarek, the reptilian envoy who had accused Earth the previous day, narrowed his eyes, his scales shimmering faintly in irritation. What evidence do you claim to possess? Sarek demanded, his voice sharp. Or is this merely an attempt to deflect blame? Ethan ignored the jab and activated the presentation Rachel had prepared. The holographic display shifted, showing charts and data streams highlighting discrepancies in resource allocation across the Council's member worlds. These records reveal a pattern of corruption within the Council itself, Ethan explained. Certain factions have been diverting critical supplies meant for struggling colonies, leaving them vulnerable to collapse. And now, fabricated evidence seeks to pin these crimes on Earth. Gasps erupted throughout the chamber. Smaller delegations, many of whom had suffered under the Council's inequitable policies, began whispering furiously among themselves. Larger factions, however, remained guarded, their leaders exchanging wary looks. Kaelvorn watched silently from his seat, his expression unreadable. Ethan couldn't tell whether the ambassador approved or disapproved of his move, but he pressed on regardless. To make matters worse, Ethan continued, the recent attacks on neutral colonies appear to be part of a coordinated effort to destabilize trust within this alliance. Humanity has been falsely implicated in these atrocities, likely as a means to distract from the real perpetrators. He paused, letting his words sink in before delivering the final blow. I urge every member of this council to demand transparency. not just from Earth, but from those who hold power within this body. The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, some demanding immediate investigations, while others dismissed Ethan's claims as desperate attempts to save face. Zorthus struggled to restore order, its claws clicking rhythmically against the podium like a metronome counting out frustration. Sarek stood abruptly, his tail lashing behind him. "This is preposterous," he snarled. "You accuse unnamed factions of corruption without providing proof. Where is your evidence, Ambassador Carter? Or are you simply buying time?" Ethan clenched his jaw, but kept his composure. "The evidence exists," he replied evenly, "but revealing it fully would compromise ongoing investigations. What I've shown you today is only the beginning. If we work together to uncover the truth, we can prevent further harm to innocent lives, including those of my people." Before Sarek could retort, Cale Vorn rose gracefully to his feet. His presence commanded instant attention, silencing the room once more. "Ambassador Carter raises valid concerns," Cale said, his deep voice carrying authority. "While his methods may seem unorthodox, the questions he poses deserve answers. Perhaps it is time for this council to undergo a thorough audit, one that leaves no stone unturned." The suggestion reignited the debate. Some delegates cheered Cale's proposal, seeing it as a chance to expose long-standing injustices. Others vehemently opposed it, claiming such an audit would waste resources and destabilize the council further. Amid the uproar, Ethan locked eyes with Cale briefly. The taller man gave him a subtle nod, as if to say, "You're welcome." When the session finally adjourned, Ethan returned to his quarters, feeling both drained and cautiously optimistic. Rachel was waiting for him, pacing anxiously near the window. She stopped when she saw him, her face lighting up with hope. "How did it go?" she asked quickly. "Did they believe you?" "I think I bought us some time," Ethan replied, sinking into a chair. "Cale backed me up, which helped, but I'm not sure how much of that was genuine support versus manipulation. Either way, the council agreed to form an investigative committee to look into the allegations." Rachel frowned. "An investigation won't stop whoever's framing us. They'll find a way to twist the findings in their favor unless we stay one step ahead." "You're right," Ethan said, rubbing his temples. "We need to keep digging and fast. If we can identify the mastermind behind this conspiracy, we might be able to turn the tide." Rachel nodded, pulling out her datapad. "I've been analyzing communication logs between key council members. There's a trail, but it's buried deep. It'll take time to piece it together." "Time is something we don't have," Ethan muttered. "Still, keep working on it. Every lead counts." Later that evening, Ethan received an unexpected visitor. A soft knock at his door drew him away from his thoughts. When he opened it, he found Cale standing there, his shimmering skin catching the dim light of the corridor. "Ambassador Carter," Cale said with a faint smile. "May I come in?" Ethan hesitated, but stepped aside, allowing the taller man to enter. "What do you want, Cale?" Cale walked to the center of the room, his movements fluid and deliberate. "I wanted to commend you on your performance today. You handled yourself well under pressure. Few would have dared to challenge the council so openly. Was that your plan all along?" Ethan asked bluntly. "To push me into exposing corruption while keeping your own hands clean?" Cale chuckled softly, though there was little humor in the sound. "Let's just say I have my reasons for wanting the council dismantled. Whether you view me as ally or adversary depends entirely on your perspective. For now, our goals align, and what happens when they don't?" Ethan countered. "Then we'll deal with that bridge when we come to it," Cale replied smoothly. "For now, focus on surviving the coming days. Trust no one, not even me." With that, Cale turned and left, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. The man's words lingered in the air, unsettling yet impossible to ignore. Was Cale truly helping, or was he playing a longer game? Either way, Ethan knew one thing for certain. The road ahead would be treacherous. The next morning brought fresh challenges. News of Ethan's accusations spread rapidly, igniting protests among smaller species who felt exploited by the Council's policies. Larger factions scrambled to distance themselves from the controversy, while shadowy operatives worked tirelessly to discredit Ethan's claims. Back on Earth, President Laura Bennett addressed the public, urging unity and resilience in the face to Part 5. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty. Across the galaxy, the fallout from Ethan's revelations rippled through the Council's member worlds. Smaller species, long marginalized by the Council's policies, began to rise up in protest. Colonies that had suffered shortages or outright abandonment rallied behind Earth's accusations, their voices growing louder with each passing hour. Larger factions, however, scrambled to contain the damage. Their leaders convened secret meetings, attempting to coordinate a unified response, but unity was in short supply. On Narration, the atmosphere within the council chambers grew increasingly volatile. Delegates argued openly, their tempers flaring as accusations flew back and forth. Some called for immediate action against Earth, while others demanded investigations into the corruption exposed by Ethan Zorthus. The council's president struggled to maintain control, its multifaceted eyes darting between delegates as it tried to broker peace. But even the insectoid leader couldn't quell the rising tide of distrust. Ethan spent much of his time in private discussions with Rachel, strategizing their next moves. They knew the investigative committee would be a battleground, not an impartial inquiry. Whoever controlled the investigation would shape its outcome, and, right now, Earth had few allies among the powerful factions. "We need to find out who's leading this conspiracy," Ethan said one evening, as they reviewed new data in his quarters. "If we can expose the mastermind before the committee finishes its work, we might stand a chance." Rachel nodded, her fingers flying across her datapad. "I've traced some of the communication logs to a group of high-ranking officials. They're using encrypted channels, but I'm close to cracking them. If I can get inside their network, we'll have proof." Ethan frowned. "That's risky. If they catch you." "They won't," Rachel interrupted firmly. "I've been careful. Besides, we don't have a choice. Sitting back and waiting for the committee to decide our fate isn't an option." Before Ethan could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. He opened it to find Cale Vorn standing there, his expression unreadable. The ambassador stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his shimmering skin catching the dim light. "Ambassador Carter," Cale said smoothly, "I trust you're aware of the chaos unfolding outside these walls." "I am," Ethan replied cautiously. "What do you want, Cale?" Cale smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "I wanted to remind you of our agreement, or rather, my offer of assistance. Things are escalating faster than anticipated. You'll need allies if you hope to survive what's coming." "And what exactly are you offering?" Ethan asked, his tone guarded. "Access," Cale replied simply. "I can provide information on key players within the council, those most invested in maintaining the status quo. Use it wisely, and you may yet turn the tide in your favor." Ethan studied the taller man carefully. Cale's words carried weight, but trusting him felt like stepping onto thin ice. Still, refusing his help wasn't an option either. "All right," Ethan said finally, "but if you cross us, I'll make sure everyone knows where the betrayal came from." Cale chuckled softly. "Fair enough. Just remember you're playing a dangerous game, Ambassador. Trust no one, not even me." With that, Cale turned and left, leaving Ethan and Rachel alone once more. Rachel let out a slow breath, shaking her head. "He's trouble, Ethan. Whatever he's planning, it's bigger than just exposing corruption." "I know," Ethan admitted, "but we don't have many options right now. Let's focus on what we can control." The next morning, chaos erupted anew. A faction within the council, led by Sarek, publicly accused Earth of orchestrating the protests sweeping across smaller worlds. They claimed humanity was inciting rebellion to distract from its own crimes. The accusations sparked outrage, both among Earth's supporters and its detractors. Tensions reached a boiling point when several alien delegates stormed out of the council chambers, vowing to sever ties with the Alliance altogether. Amid the turmoil, Rachel made a breakthrough. She managed to decrypt a series of encrypted messages between council officials, uncovering detailed plans to frame Earth for the colony attacks. The documents named names including some of the council's most influential leaders. It was damning evidence, but releasing it prematurely could backfire. "What do we do with this?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling slightly as she handed Ethan the datapad. "This could destroy the conspiracy or provoke them into striking first." Ethan stared at the screen, his mind racing. "We can't release it yet. Not until we're ready to act decisively. For now, keep it safe. If anyone finds out you uncovered this, they'll come after me," Rachel finished grimly. "Got it." As the day wore on, Ethan received word that the investigative committee would convene the following morning. Its members included representatives from both sympathetic and hostile factions, a mix designed to ensure gridlock rather than progress. Ethan knew the odds were stacked against him, but he refused to give up. That night, as he prepared for the hearing, Ethan reflected on everything that had brought him to this moment. He thought about Rachel, risking her life to uncover the truth. About Cale, whose motives remained shrouded in mystery. And about humanity itself, teetering on the edge of catastrophe when dawn broke over Alarian. Ethan entered the council chambers with resolve etched into every line of his face. The room was packed, the air thick with anticipation. As the committee chair called the session to order, Ethan took his seat, knowing the hours ahead would test every ounce of strength and cunning he possessed. The hearing began with Sarek presenting the case against Earth. His arguments were sharp, backed by forged evidence, designed to paint humanity as the villain. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he rose calmly, meeting Sarek's gaze with unwavering determination. "This council has been built on lies," Ethan said, his voice steady and clear. "Lies about resource distribution, lies about accountability, and lies about justice. Today, I intend to expose those lies and the individuals responsible for perpetuating them." Gasps echoed through the chamber as Ethan activated a holographic display, showing excerpts from the decrypted messages Rachel had uncovered. Names appeared alongside dates and locations, implicating council leaders in the conspiracy. The room erupted into chaos, with delegates shouting accusations and demands for explanations. Sarek lunged to his feet, his scales flashing angrily. "This is slander," he roared. "Fabricated nonsense meant to deflect blame. It's the truth." Ethan shot back, his voice cutting through the noise. "And if you deny it, then prove me wrong. Open your records. Let the galaxy see what you've done." For a moment, silence fell over the chamber. Then, unexpectedly, Cale Vorn stood. His presence commanded attention, his shimmering form radiating authority. "Ambassador Carter speaks the truth," Cale declared, his voice resonating through the room. "The corruption within this council runs deep. Those who resist transparency seek only to protect their own power. It is time for change, for renewal." The declaration sent shockwaves through the assembly. Some delegates cheered, emboldened by Cale's words. Others recoiled, realizing the foundation of their authority was crumbling. Amid the chaos, Ethan locked eyes with Cale, unsure whether to feel gratitude or dread. The hearing adjourned in disarray, leaving the council fractured and uncertain. As Ethan returned to his quarters, he found Rachel waiting anxiously. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It started," Ethan replied, his expression grim. "The council's unraveling. But Cale's involvement, I don't know what he's planning." "Rachel?" He's playing a game we don't fully understand. Rachel nodded slowly, her eyes filled with determination. Then we'll figure it out together. Whatever happens next, we can't stop fighting. Ethan agreed silently, knowing the battle was far from over. The galaxy teetered on the brink of transformation, and humanity's survival depended on navigating the storm ahead.